Today we're taking you on a tour of the land of the rising sun, where nothing seems impossible, or at least that's what we thought until we found out that the Japanese have some taboos that might seem ordinary to you but are strictly observed there. So buckle up, we're flying to Japan, an East Asian country that you'll see from a whole new perspective today. Once you finish this video, you'll probably start to believe, just like me, that the Japanese come from a different planet than ours. If you're planning to visit Japan and have tattoos, whether they cover your whole body or just a small visible one, think twice. In Japan, having tattoos is generally frowned upon, especially showing them off in public. If you openly display your tattoos, you might be barred from entering certain public places like pools, public baths, gyms, and many ryokans, the traditional Japanese inns. Even though people might recognize that you're a foreigner, it's expected that you respect Japanese customs and try to cover your tattoos. Of course, there are many Japanese who love tattoos, but they often keep them covered for social reasons and employment needs. Even members of the Yakuza, a rebellious mafia known for their prominent tattoos, traditionally choose to have them in areas usually covered by clothes. This shows just how unpopular tattoos are in Japan. You are having a great time with friends at the best Japanese restaurant in Tokyo. You were so pleased with the service that when leaving the table, you leave a tip for the waiter. Big mistake. In Japan, it is strictly forbidden to leave tips for servers, taxi drivers, hairdressers, doormen, porters, and anyone else providing a service while being paid for it. Even if it is meant as an extra thank you, in Japan, it can be considered rude and insulting. Moreover, most Japanese restaurants require customers to pay their bill at the cashier rather than leaving money for the server. What about tipping? It is also not required for taxi or bus rides and many hotel services. You will probably receive some of the best service in the world in Japan, but it comes from people doing their job with pride, not for your pretty eyes or in the hope of a tip from you. So don't feel embarrassed when someone serves you as they should, in the best possible way. You've caught a cold, you're feeling terrible, and you have a runny nose that just won't stop. To make matters worse, you find yourself in Japan on a business trip. Why does that matter? Well, in Japan, blowing your nose in public is highly frowned upon. It's seen as a major sign of disrespect to those around you. Worse yet, it's viewed as downright offensive. This doesn't mean Japanese people don't get sick, but when they do, they prefer to sniffle and swallow their mucus rather than blow it out. Mucus is considered as dirty as urine. So, if you blow your nose in the subway, it's almost as if you were urinating or defecating in public for everyone to see. That's how they see it. Everyone has their own perspective, though. Personally, I can't imagine sniffling my nasal secretions. And you, what would you do in such a situation? If you go to Japan, you won't be offered a 4-scoop ice cream. You won't see a 4th floor in buildings. Nothing is sold for 4 yen. No one gives back 4 coins in change. And you won't buy packs of water with 4 bottles. In Japan, the number 4 is so feared that it is hardly ever used. The number 4 is considered unlucky because it sounds like the word for death, similar to how some of us regard Friday the 13th, but they take it very seriously. This fear started a long time ago when someone spread this false belief. Some people believed it, the idea spread, and the rest is history. Because the number 4 is seen as unlucky on such a large scale, you'll see many examples of this fear in daily life across almost all East Asian cultures. For example, in China, military aircraft are numbered starting with 5, like the Chengdu J-5. In Korea, the 4th floor is marked as F instead of 4. And Korail, the national railway company, skipped over locomotive number 4444. The South Korean Marines do not use the number 4 in their pendant numbers. So, in Japan, you will rarely see the number 4 used. Whenever there's a chance to replace it, they do so without hesitation. It's almost like a complete paranoia. Anyway, since I returned from Tokyo, I avoid the number 4 as much as possible, maybe out of habit, even though deep down I know it's irrational and unfounded. What about you? Do you have any superstitions that make you fear a number? Before you continue, don't forget to click here to subscribe if you like this video, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here's a custom your grandmother would probably like. Yes, your grandmother who spends her days sweeping her living room, vacuuming her house, and decorating her walls so you and your kids can come over on the weekend, make a mess, and treat her home like an ice rink. If there is one custom that the Japanese are strict about, it's this one: removing their shoes every time they enter a house from the street. So, you will notice when you are there that at every doorway, there are rows of shoes of different sizes lined up, because in Japan you never ever wear shoes inside. When you come home from school, work, or when you visit someone's home, you take off your shoes at the door, line them up, and put on the slippers that your host has set aside just for you. This is their way of honoring you. Sometimes, when you enter a home, you will see a separate area near the entrance where all the shoes are taken off. This entry area is called a genkan. Traditionally, the Japanese like to draw a clear line between inside and outside. Even though this area is technically inside, it is still considered outside, and is usually covered with a different type of flooring than the rest of the house. If you visit someone's home in Japan, be sure to stop first at the genkan. Take off your shoes. Another good tip: it's polite to turn your shoes to face the door after you take them off. But as for why that is, don't ask me. Don't be surprised if you visit Japan during Valentine's Day and see no one kissing, caressing, or showing affection in public. It's frowned upon there. Japanese people are generally reserved and modest, and they also believe that drawing attention to oneself in public is inappropriate behavior. They are especially uncomfortable with public displays of affection like kissing, holding hands, and caressing. This isn't about rudeness or religious customs. It's simply a matter of modesty. In your country, it might be normal to say no directly, even if it offends someone. In Japan, however, refusing something is done very carefully, as if handling delicate objects, because it's seen as important to refuse without being hurtful. Instead of just saying no, which can get anyone out of an awkward situation, the Japanese use more indirect and complex techniques. Yes, why keep it simple when it can be complex? For example, they might use very polite and long phrases before declining gently. They choose to use negative phrases or expressions of regret like, "I would have liked to," "I'm afraid that," "It's difficult," "It's delicate." They show humility and kindness, speak in a regretful tone, all to stay polite, courteous, and well-mannered. Meanwhile, for us, no means no. If you find it challenging to eat sushi with chopsticks, you're not alone. For many who are passionate about Japanese culture, using chopsticks is an art form. Even if you think you've mastered this skill, there's more to learn about the unique way the Japanese use chopsticks, called hashi or ohashi. If you occasionally eat Japanese food with your boss, pay attention to this. When using chopsticks, it's important to place them on a chopstick rest, called a hashioki, once you're done eating. This rest is usually provided, but you should never place your chopsticks directly on your bowl or plate. If you don't have a hashioki, you can make one from the paper wrapper your chopsticks came in. After finishing your meal, put the chopsticks back in the wrapper and fold the end to show you're done, which is something not everyone does. If the tips of the chopsticks are dirty, wipe them with paper and don't use your mouth to clean them off. Also, place the chopsticks horizontally on the table or tray with the tips facing left, as it's considered rude in Japan to point the tips at someone else. Additionally, even though chopsticks are used to bring food to your mouth, don't let them enter your mouth, especially to pick out rice stuck to your teeth. Avoid making gestures with chopsticks and never point them at someone, even unintentionally. Remember, the Japanese are very superstitious about death, so never pass food from one pair of chopsticks to another, as this resembles the way cremated remains are transferred in funerals. Also, never stick your chopsticks vertically in your bowl, as this is done during funeral ceremonies with a bowl of rice. If you see Japanese tourists with their cameras taking pictures of everything that moves, including people, it's because they later blur the faces of strangers. In Japan, taking a photo of someone's face in public isn't a criminal offense, but it can be a civil issue if the person photographed sees their picture published somewhere. They can sue the photographer for privacy violation. So, people freely take photos and then hide the faces. That's why, on most Japanese blogs, YouTube videos, and TV shows, the faces of people in the background are blurred. This process is tough and frustrating for any passionate creative, but at least it keeps the peace. Jules Jouy, a French songwriter, once said the famous phrase, "The time is the time, before the time it's not the time, after the time it's no longer the time." It seems like he might have had some Japanese genes, since the Japanese are very strict about punctuality. In Japan, trains run on a schedule that is set to the minute. If a train is even a few minutes late, the railway company will issue a delay certificate at the stations. There, it is customary to strictly respect the boarding time and the start time, because delays are seen as one of the critical mistakes that can significantly harm the reputation of students or employees in schools and in society. So, if a Japanese friend tells you they will meet you at 10:17 p.m., they really mean 10:17 p.m., not a minute more or less.